Hello everyone, thanks for coming outside with me today. Yes, we will end up outside eventually, because today we're talking about the easiest tuning method, or at least I think, of all time. So I have plenty of videos already on the channel that are the full A to Z of tuning, bare shaft tuning, knock tuning, indexing, everything you could possibly imagine. Hours and hours and hours of work of going into getting a full dozen set of shafts to fly perfectly compared to each other, and then perfectly coming out of whatever bow that you're going to be shooting. I also have plenty of videos on the steps that I take with tuning, rest movement, yoke tuning, all that sort of stuff, how to get a bow in time from the beginning. All of those are down in the description below in When My Tuning Hits the Fan playlist that I've created. Please, if you're at that point and you're really stuck on tuning, go ahead and check those videos out first. Talks a lot about grip and torque pressure, high, mid, and low wrist grips, and all different sorts of things, building bell curve arrows, which is a real smart thing to do in today's day and age, if you ask me. But building arrows and building a bow and tuning that bow to get any arrow to fly is paramount and is really important, but it can be very difficult and time consuming if you go down to the nittiest of grittiest and splitting of the finest of hairs. So today I want to go over the tuning method that I've used for almost 2 decades, and it's just the simplest form of tuning possible, and it works really, really well with bell curve style arrows. And when I say bell curve, I mean things that are within the what the industry expects you to be shooting. So if you're like a 28-inch draw, 60 pounds, you should be shooting like a 350, 340 spine, 100, 125 grain point and a stock insert up front. For me, it's a 300 spine cut to 31 inches for my 31-inch draw length, 125 grain point standard insert, a couple of blazers, maybe a lighted knock on the end. That's a very standard arrow build for me, and it's easy to tune in a litany of different ways. And you can cut corners very easily because you don't have to nitpick with your dynamic spine or the spine of the arrow when it actually is put under pressure, which of course dynamic spine changes based on how much point weight you put up here, how stiff the arrow is, how long the arrow is, and how fast your bow is. The more you stay within the bell curve, the easier it is to figure that out. So these are very normal arrows, very budget friendly arrows actually. These are Victory V-Force in the 3000 straightness, so the gamers, but you can get the sports for around $70 a dozen, and most people get them already pre-fletched from the factory, so you don't have to be fletching your own arrows in order to do this method. There is no pre-bare shaft knock tuning or anything else in this video that you're going to see. This is the easiest tuning method, so it means that you can pick an arrow off the shelf at Walmart, Shields, Dick's Sporting Goods, Field and Stream, wherever you get your pre-fletched arrows, hopefully your local pro shop, and you can take that pre-fletched arrow, whether it has all different colors or like all solid like I have here with these all white blazers, and you can take that arrow out, get it to tune, get it to paper tune, and get your fixed blade broadheads flying perfectly with your field points. So step number 1 is getting your bow into factory spec. That means the axle to axle length is where it's supposed to be. Your center shot of your rest is where it's supposed to be. For most manufacturers, that's 13/16 from the burger button hole out down the center of the arrow as it's in the rest when it's knocked onto the string. So I have my Elite Energy 35 here just off camera. I have a Hamsky primer and drop away rest. I have it set to 13/16. I have it running dead center through the burger button hole, 90 degrees perpendicular to the string. I also have made sure my cams are in time, meaning that they're rolling over. I have a $30 DIY drawbore build. I'll throw links up and down so that way you can go to that, because that is a huge DIY easy, cheap investment. For another 20-30 bucks, you can throw into scale, and you can really know what the poundage of your bow is, as well as the let-off percentage when you actually get to full draw. So I'm going to take my Energy 35 with everything set to factory specs, and I'm going to shoot through my paper tuning stand. We'll take the camera on the backside, get a couple of lights on, and we'll see what kind of tears we get through paper just shooting the standard, already pre-built Victory V-Force arrows. All right, so I know this lighting is less than ideal, but it is what it is. We are in a basement after all. 13/16 is our center shot. That's just a really good starting point for nearly every manufacturer on the market. Some like a little bit out more, but as we shoot through paper here with this Victory arrow, this very standard bell curve arrow here, we'll be able to see very quickly. I am straddling a line here at 8 feet from the paper. So probably by the time with my really long draw length, my arrow is probably leaving a launch point of around 6 feet, which is fine. We will move back as we go through this process here. I'm just going to stick with one arrow for now. I'm not knock tuning. I'm not going to be changing anything. I just have this set up from the factory with its fletching. So if you have a factory fletched arrow, we usually have the one off colored vein known as the cock vein. A child has interrupted the video. So anyway, like I was saying, usually arrows fletched from the factory have the cock vein or the off-colored vein, and for most rests nowadays, whisker biscuits and dropaways, that faces up, and that's where you're going to start. For me, since I fletch them all the same color, I'll often have the label or the crusting of the arrow facing up with the name, so I know they're all kind of starting in the exact same place, and I'll number them or whatever I need to do as we move through the process. But first things first, let's do a shot here. I'm going to work with just this one arrow. That's pretty darn near close. I'm going to go grab the arrow again here. As a side note too, most factory fletched arrows are going to have a 1 to 2 degree offset or helical. These are nothing insane that I've done myself. They're about a 3 degree left helical. Nothing outlandish at all. All right, so let's take a look at these through paper. So we can ignore these two bullet holes. They're from another very happy customer, left for the Average Deck Archery shop not too long ago. Here we have almost a perfect bullet hole, and then we have that perfect bullet hole here. Again, 13/16 from the riser, perfectly nock level up and down, nothing fancy. Cams are in time, it's a bell curve arrow, blah, 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 blah. So what I'm going to do now, since I have 3 other arrows, I'm going to shoot them all through paper and see if we can get a bullet hole, leaving the rest as is. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory there. We have perfect bullet hole down here, 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 and here. This one looks a little funky. It just tore funky through the paper. Again, these two up here did not matter. They were from a customer earlier this week. So we shot 5 arrows with 5 bullet holes, all different various angles of fletching orientation. And this is a big thing to bring up now. When you have a normal weight arrow and a normal diameter arrow or a normal sized arrow, a lot of the times you will get the fletchings taking over within 6 feet. So remember, we started cock vein up, right? But we've already made, what? Almost a complete quarter turn of direction here. Shooting a left helical, my arrow does clock to the left coming out of my string. Out of the bow when it's as a bear shaft, I just know that from past experience. So it's already started to turn at 6 feet from the target. If you shoot a really heavy arrow or a really light arrow on both ends of the bell curve, this becomes really difficult sometimes to get it to start controlling and commanding this very quickly. But since we're at like literally 6 feet from point of launch and it's already starting to rotate to the left, I don't know if that's a clocking thing or, you know, maybe it's at 3 degree helical, which still isn't that insane. We have already taken over rotation, which means these fletchings are going to be well on their way to steering this arrow completely by about 10 feet, which means that if I was going to bear shaft tune this or do something along those lines, I wouldn't really have to worry about bear shaft tuning over 10 to 15 feet. So what happens if you shoot here, say you have a half a dozen or a dozen arrows, they're already fletched. What do you do now if one doesn't play with the rest? Quite frankly, that is tolerances within arrows, even if you buy the expensive stuff, you know, $100 to $150 a dozen for the shafts alone. If you're going to buy that, you still expect to have 1, maybe even 2 arrows that aren't going to play nice with the rest. Now, we will talk about nock tuning them with broadheads later down the road, and maybe you will get that to play nice. But again, the fletchings are already starting to rotate at 6 feet here, and with a 1 or 2 degree offset or helical, they're still going to be doing the same. They're going to be very quickly taking over, and probably you won't notice that very slight tear at 8, 10, 12 feet, and you're definitely not going to notice it at 20, 30, 40, and so on in yards. So now what I would typically do if I had that one that wasn't behaving, which I don't here, all my arrows are behaving really well, I would step back to that further distance, 15, 20 feet, let's say, and shoot through paper at that further distance and see if it's still nock right, up, down, left, or whatever it may be, and see if it's still misbehaving. I have a feeling that it won't be. If it's a 1/4 inch or less off, 1/2 inch maybe, depending on how severe the tear is, if it's high and left or if it's low and right or whatever. If it's straight up or straight horizontal, it will probably correct itself very quickly. You might have to nock tune it later down the road. Again, I already said this with the broadhead tuning, which we're going to get to outside here in just a little bit. So now we're going to take this outside. We're going to go ahead and start shooting and getting some groups down with field points, feeling out our anchor point and face pressure, and seeing how we can group down range at 20, 30, 40 yards. Then we're going to break out the broadheads and the broadhead target. In this case, it's going to be a Magnus Stinger Buzz Cut and a Magnus Stinger Killer B. And we're going to be shooting them at 20, 30, and 40 yards and seeing if all of the arrows behave with just one broadhead. We don't have to shoot all the broadheads, just one, and seeing if we need to nock tune them to bring them back into the group. Now with the rest, you always want to chase the point for horizontal tears, you chase the nock for vertical tears. With the sight, you chase the arrow. So if you're up high and left, you got to move your sight up and to the left. So let's get up here and let's get starting sighting in. One for broadheads for later, and one for field points for now. I think what I enjoy the most out of this tuning method, aside from the fact of how simple and painless it is the fact that I spend more time actually getting to shoot my bow outside than spending it in the basement paper tuning. It's really nice. All right, so we're low and we're left. It's better, it's still left though. Yep, we are right in there. So I'm gonna move you guys down there now. I'm gonna step back to 40. All my bows shoot about the same speed, in particular if I'm shooting these same arrows, these 300 spine, 125 grain point, somewhere in the 9s for GPI. So I'm gonna step back to 40, see if my pin gap's even close, and then we can jump right into broadhead tuning. Okay, so clearly I need to maybe touch my sight over a little bit to the left to bring this group over, but this is a fantastic group for 40. Pull all the arrows out at once. We're now ready to get a broadhead on here, and we're going to start shooting at the High Roller XL and see if we can't get broadheads to fly with our field points out to 30 and 40 yards. All right, so this next bit here is definitely not rocket science. I have a Magnus, this is the Stinger Buzz Cut model with the serrations, 125 grain. Of course, the same standard arrow. We're gonna start with a green nocked one, and we're gonna be shooting here at this middle right dot. Basically, I know that out to 40 with my field points, I'm doing really well. Maybe out to 40, I'm still a little left. So if out at 40, I'm over here with my broadhead on the left side of the dot. I know it's a little sight issue. I'm not gonna touch it just yet, just in case that was me not being lined up in my peep right or whatever it may be, but I'm going to start at 30 yards with this broadhead. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for this arrow within 1 to 2 shots to consistently be in this white dot here. Now this white dot here is about 3 inches across, maybe a touch over, and if I can put all of the shots that I'm going to do with this arrow into this spot, I know that I have the accuracy that I need to be a northeast whitetail hunter, which most people need 40 yards and under, heck really 30 yards and under for the vast majority of whitetail hunters. So I will start with this arrow and then I'll move on to the next one and I'll move on to the next one and the next one. In the event that I have an arrow that constantly planes high or right or left and it's grouping by itself in that particular location, then I will nock tune. We'll see what happens here. Maybe I'll get an arrow that does not behave and it wants to be scattered compared to everything else being in the center. We will nock tune him with the fletchings on there. So let's stop flapping our gums here and let's get shooting. Again, we're going back to 30 yards to start this test. I trust at 20 that this would be totally fine, so we're gonna start at 30. That is exactly where the pin was at when the shot broke, right here on the right edge, dead center through. I'm gonna call this arrow good. We're gonna screw the broadhead onto another. Take this arrow off, we'll just set it off to the side. We know we're done with it. I do number my arrows, so this is arrow number 4, and I number my arrows in the order that I fletch them. For consistency's sake, I know that if, early in the batch of fletching, I did a bad job and the veins start to fall off, I know that maybe 1, 2, and 3 might be a problem. If it was toward the end of the batch, it might be 9, 10, 11, 12. This is arrow number 2 here. Same deal, just different color nock. We're gonna step back to 30 yards, shoot at the same dot, and see what kind of accuracy we get. Really struggling with the right to left wind we have today. It's really blowing me around, but you see my height is perfect and I was still, again, on that right edge when that, with my pin, when that shot broke off. We're gonna shoot it again. The wind got to settle, I got to settle, and I executed a beautiful shot. That arrow is also now good out to 30 yards, which again, I've taken maybe 2 whitetails over 35 yards in my entire this will be my 16th year of bow hunting. So I will take 30-yard accuracy like that. I mean, I can make the strong inference that out to 40, and I will eventually, at the end of this, I will take probably one of the 2 straightest arrows in the bunch, and I will shoot them out to 40, and those will be my hunting arrows, definitely out of a dozen arrows. Of course, I'm only doing this with 4 today just for the sake of time. Here's arrow number 6 out of the batch. Whoops. Here's arrow number 6 out of the batch, broadhead on. Let's go shoot it. Oh man. Once again, the wind died down, I settled down, dead ringer. I'm not even gonna shoot that a second time. That was exactly where the pin was on. Gosh, these Magnus broadheads tear the absolute crap out of targets. I mean, any fixed blade does, but that's what it's doing to a target. Imagine what to do to a deer. Good grief. And last but not least, we got arrow number 1, the very first one I fletched out of this batch. Screw them on, 30 yards, and then we'll step back to 40 as well, and we'll see if this one behaves. I have a feeling it will, considering all of the others have behaved so far. We'll see though if we need to knock tune this one. That's definitely a really good shot, but I don't feel like my pin was in this location. I actually felt like I was more on the right edge of this dot, so I'm gonna shoot this arrow again and see, it might be planing off to the left a little bit, but if I shoot it again and it's dead nuts and I was dead nuts, then we don't have to knock tune. All right, so we have our first troublemaker in the batch. Now you're like, Nate, how's that in trouble? It's within the 3-inch dot. Well, I deliberately held off over here. We had a nice calm moment there with the wind. I held off over here and it planed a solid 4 to 5 inches to the left again. I kind of had a suspicion it did it the first time, and it definitely did it the second time. So I know that I don't have this massive, high left or whatever it is. It's planing off to one direction. So what that means is I'm going to knock tune this already fletched arrow. Now this is pretty straightforward. So right now, again, if you have a pre-fletched factory arrow, it would have 2, let's say orange or yellow or green, and usually 1 white. I'm now going to rotate this. I'm going to keep the knock in the same spot, and just like a regular knock tuning, remember I have the cresting up here, I'm going to rotate this to the next fletch over. So I'm going to rotate this that appropriate 120 degrees here. Now it's this way. This now is going to be the up vein, and the knock is going to be here. And I'm going to shoot this again. And if I break on the center and it lands in the center, then I've knock tuned this arrow to work with broadheads. Now, when you have a field point on here, it's not going to make a hill of beans difference, because this is a bell curve arrow. This is a very standard arrow. You go into your local pro shop. Heck, you could use the arrows you've been hunting with for 15 years if you like, and you can do this knock tuning with a fletched arrow just to get a broadhead to behave. You can do this too with mechanical broadheads too, just to eke out even that little bit extra piece of accuracy. So I've moved that 120. We're going to shoot again at this dot and see. Like I said, I held off and I still planed. Now I'm definitely be holding center and see if I can hit center with this shot. Problem absolutely solved. I broke dead nuts center, and it is dead nuts center here for 30 yards accuracy with pins. That is perfect. Now, usually I would shoot this again, but I'm not going to. I'm actually going to take this troublesome arrow. I'm going to go back to 40 yards, and I like to take the troublemaker, go back to 40, shoot at the same dot here, and shoot the target a little bit more, but take it back to 40 and see if I can get it to hold within this dot here. Again, I don't shoot at animals past really 35 yards, really past 30 yards. But if I can get this one here to work out for me at 40 yards within this white dot, within the confined constraints of my backyard and all the settings that I can control back here, then I'm going to call this batch of arrows perfect. I absolutely love it when a plan comes together. 40 yards, you could not have asked for a better target spot there. I am super tickled, super happy, super pleased. Magnus, by the way, if you go ahead and take this broadhead and just touch it up and sharpen it, you could take this exact broadhead into the woods. I prefer to buy a pack or two and make one head my practice head. So I've got a practice stinger buzz cut, killer bee, black hornet's a razor, all different kind of heads, and I just keep them out and available. Sometimes I'll Sharpie them up with the black Sharpie. So I don't worry about matching my arrows to different broadheads. I just screw broadheads onto my arrows and get that field point like accuracy out to 40 yards. I'm not even going to bother shooting the other 3 arrows. They were really good to 30. I'm going to make the strong inference they're really good to 40. And like I said, for me in particular, and I'm assuming most of you at home that are whitetail hunters, 40 yards is an absolute bomb of a target and a bomb of a shot, in particular if you're in the thick hardwoods of the Northeast like where I hunt. So I can already hear everybody at home. So Nate, does this mean you're completely forgetting bear shaft tuning and all the other tuning videos you've done on your channel? The answer is of course not. Don't be ridiculous.
I'm still going to knock tune, I'm still going to bare shaft tune for every single tournament that I'm going to go to, whether that be indoor, outdoor, field, or for 3D. That is definitely still going to happen. But to help the guy who doesn't do that and to simplify the process, make it easier for him to work with the arrows he already or she already have at home, or what your local pro shop already offers, Victory, Gold Tip, Carbon Express, Beeman, Easton, whatever it may be, being able to take a stock arrow to get that level of accuracy that quickly. I mean, I did this whole thing even while filming in less than an hour. And if I had a dozen arrows, maybe it took me 2 hours, less than a weekend to get perfect broadhead flight. Little bit of knock tuning and it resolved it out to 40 yards. That's a win-win. So I'm not going to leave bare shaft tuning or all the very highly in-depth and complicated tuning processes, but to make it simple for the local guy at home who's just looking to harvest a whitetail and put a big set of antlers on his wall, I think this is the perfect way to go. So that's all for this video. If you have any questions about this tuning method or any other tuning method that I follow on my channel, please follow the links in the description below. Hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, send me an email, or even leave a comment with your own tuning experiences down below. Hope you're able to get outside, enjoy the sport of archery, archery hunting if you so choose. Definitely enjoy God's beautiful summertime creation, and we'll get to see you next time.